Raised by a strict grandmother, she believed love was something meant for others, until a wealthy stranger, shrouded in shadows, invited her to live under his roof. In the hallways of that house, she found letters, portraits, and memories that weren't hers. If you like love and romance stories, watch until the end. Subscribe to this channel and leave a comment saying where you are listening from. Cassian D'Angelo was more than a millionaire. He was an enigma wrapped in bespoke suits, a man whose soul had been forged between irreparable losses and dirty business dealings. He had built his empire on ruins, some made of concrete, others of flesh, blood, and silence. He was the type of man who didn't believe in love, not from disbelief, but from self-preservation. To love was to expose oneself, and he had learned very early that every surrender demanded a price. The past had left invisible scars on him, his father's death under mysterious circumstances, his mother confined to a psychiatric clinic until the end of her days, and an empire inherited before he even knew how to deal with his own emotions. He never had time for innocence, only for control. His offices occupied 3 floors of a glass tower in Canary Wharf, overlooking the Thames like a watchtower. From there, Cassian controlled property developments across London, Manchester, Birmingham. His name appeared in the Financial Times more often than he appeared in public. Those who knew him spoke of his ruthlessness in negotiations, his ability to detect weakness in others, his talent for turning crisis into profit. What they didn't speak about, what they couldn't see, was the emptiness that consumed him in the early hours of the morning. When the city slept and he remained awake, staring at the river's dark waters, wondering if his father had felt the same void before he died. Cassian had women, of course, beautiful women who understood the rules, who knew that what he offered was temporary, transactional. He was generous with gifts, attentive in bed, cold afterwards. None of them complained. None of them stayed long enough to matter. He preferred it that way. Attachment was dangerous. Attachment made you vulnerable, and vulnerability in his world was a luxury no one could afford. Elena Marquez, on the other hand, seemed to walk through a different world entirely. A Latin teacher at a secondary school on the verge of closure in South London, orphaned since she was 7, she had grown up among nuns and books, between the absence of touch and the silent presence of faith. Her eyes carried a disquieting stillness, like someone who bore truths she had never dared speak aloud. She had never been with a man, not from fear, but from decision. Her virginity was more than physical. It was a state of mind, an emotional territory preserved with rigor, a kind of resistance to the affective void that consumed everything around her. She didn't expect love, but she also didn't accept its absence as destiny. The school where she taught was a Victorian building with crumbling brickwork and windows that rattled in the wind. Most of her students came from council estates, from families where Latin seemed as relevant as ancient Greek mythology in their daily struggle to survive. But Elena taught with a quiet passion that sometimes broke through their cynicism. She spoke of Ovid's transformations, of Catullus's desperate love poems, of Seneca's stoicism in the face of death. She made dead languages breathe again, if only for 45 minutes at a time. Her flat was a bedsit in Peckham, barely large enough for a single bed, a desk overflowing with books, and a kitchen the size of a cupboard. She owned 3 dresses, 2 pairs of shoes, and a wool coat she had bought second-hand 5 winters ago. Money was always tight. The school paid poorly, and there were rumors it would close by the end of the term, sold to developers who would tear it down and build luxury flats no one in the neighborhood could afford. Elena tried not to think about what would happen then, where she would go, what she would do. She had learned early to live with uncertainty. The orphanage had taught her that. St. Catherine's in Lewisham, a grim building where children slept 4 to a room and affection was rationed like food. The nuns were kind in their way, strict but fair, and Elena had found refuge in the library, a dusty room with donated books where she could disappear for hours. Latin had been an accident, a discovery. She had found an old grammar book wedged behind the radiator, its pages yellowed and brittle, and something about the ancient language's precision, its architecture, had spoken to her. It was a language where everything had its place, where chaos could be ordered through declensions and conjugations. It made sense in a way her life never had. She had no memory of her mother, just fragments, sensations, the smell of lavender, a soft voice singing. But nothing concrete, nothing she could hold on to. The nuns had told her that her mother had died shortly after bringing her to St. Catherine's, that there had been no father listed, no family to claim her. Elena had accepted this with the resignation of a child who has no other choice. But sometimes late at night she wondered who her mother had been, why she had been alone, what circumstances had brought her to leave her daughter at an orphanage door on a February night. The first encounter between Cassian and Elena happened on a seemingly trivial evening. A charity dinner at a historic mansion in Mayfair, one of those events where London's wealthy gathered to write checks and feel virtuous. Cassian was the principal donor, his name prominently displayed on the program. He attended these functions out of obligation, not pleasure. They were useful for business, for maintaining appearances, for reminding the world that he was more than just a ruthless property developer. He was a philanthropist. He cared about the arts, about education, about preserving London's heritage even as he tore down and rebuilt large swathes of it. Elena was there by mistake, or so she thought. An invitation had been sent to the school, meant for the headmaster, but he had been ill that week, and Elena, as the only teacher with a dress remotely suitable for such an occasion, had been sent in his place. She had felt ridiculous walking into that gilded ballroom, surrounded by women in designer gowns and men in dinner jackets that cost more than her annual salary. She had planned to stay for an hour, make polite conversation, and leave, but then she saw him. Cassian stood by the bar, a glass of whiskey in his hand, his dark eyes scanning the room with the detachment of someone who had attended 1,000 such events. He was handsome in a way that seemed almost cruel, all sharp angles and controlled power. His suit was immaculate, his posture perfect, but there was something in his face, a tightness around his mouth, that suggested he would rather be anywhere else. Their eyes met across the room. It was a cliché, Elena thought later, the kind of moment that happened in films but not in real life, except it did happen. His gaze locked onto hers and held it, and for a moment the noise of the party seemed to fade. She felt exposed, seen in a way that was both thrilling and terrifying. She looked away first, her cheeks burning, her heart racing. He found her an hour later standing alone by a window overlooking the garden. She had been trying to work up the courage to leave when he appeared beside her, silent as a shadow. "You look like you'd rather be anywhere else," he said. His voice was low, cultured, with just a trace of something else, something harder beneath the polish. "I could say the same about you," Elena replied. He smiled at that, a brief flicker that didn't quite reach his eyes. "Observant. It's not difficult. You've been watching the exit since I arrived. So have you." They stood in silence for a moment, and Elena was acutely aware of him, of his height, his presence, the way he seemed to occupy space differently than other people. There was an intensity to him that made her nervous, made her want to flee and stay in equal measure. "I'm Cassian," he said finally. "I know. Your name is on everything. And you are?" Elena Marquez, Spanish." "My mother was, I think. I never knew her." She didn't know why she said it, why she offered that piece of herself to a stranger. Perhaps because he seemed like someone who would understand absence, loss. Or perhaps because something about him made her want to be reckless. "I'm sorry," he said. And there was something in his voice that made her believe he meant it. It was a long time ago. Time doesn't always help. She looked at him then, really looked at him, and saw something she hadn't expected. Pain. Carefully hidden, meticulously controlled, but there nonetheless. It made her bold. "Your father," she said. "I read about it." "I'm sorry." His expression didn't change, but something flickered in his eyes. "What are you doing here, Elena?" "I teach at a school your foundation supports." "Or supported." "I'm not sure anymore." "Which school?" "St. Dominic's in Southwark." He nodded slowly. "The one that's closing." "Yes." "That must be difficult." "It's necessary. Apparently progress, development, all the usual justifications." There was an edge to her voice, and she saw him register it. "You don't approve." "I don't have the luxury of approval. I just wonder where my students will go. What will happen to them? There are other schools, not like this one, not in that neighborhood." He took a sip of his whiskey, his eyes never leaving her face. "You care about them." "Of course I do. Don't you care about the people affected by your decisions?" It was perhaps too direct, too confrontational for a first meeting with a man of his stature. But Elena had never been good at pretense, at playing the games people like him seemed to expect. She spoke the truth even when silence would have been wiser. To her surprise, he didn't seem offended. If anything, he looked intrigued. Not many people speak to me like that. Maybe they should. Maybe. He finished his drink and set the glass down on a nearby table. Would you like to get out of here? The question caught her off guard. What? This party? It's tedious. I'd rather talk to you somewhere quieter. Every instinct told her to say no, to thank him politely and leave, to return to her small flat and her small life and forget this encounter had ever happened. He was dangerous. She could feel it. Not in a physical sense, but in a deeper way. He was the kind of man who could unravel her carefully constructed defenses, who could make her want things she had spent years convincing herself she didn't need. All right, she heard herself say. They left through a side entrance, avoiding the main crowd. His car was waiting, a sleek black Bentley that looked like it cost more than her entire existence. The driver opened the door without a word, and Elena slid into the leather interior, feeling like she had stepped into another world. Where are we going? She asked as the car pulled away from the curb. My home, in Belgravia. Unless you'd prefer somewhere more public. She should have preferred somewhere more public. Somewhere safe, neutral, but she found herself shaking her head. Your home is fine. The drive took less than 15 minutes, though it felt both longer and shorter than that. They didn't speak much. Cassian made a few polite inquiries about her work, her life, and she answered with the same careful honesty she had shown earlier. She didn't try to impress him, or make herself seem more than she was. It seemed pointless with someone like him. He could probably see through lies the way she could parse Latin sentences, identifying the structure beneath the surface. His house was a Georgian townhouse on a quiet square, all white facades and black railings. Inside it was exactly what she had expected. Expensive, tasteful, impersonal. The furniture looked like it had been selected by an interior designer, every piece perfect and perfectly positioned. There were no family photos, no personal touches, nothing that suggested anyone actually lived here rather than just existed between business meetings. He poured them both wine, a red that probably cost more per bottle than she spent on groceries in a month. They sat in his drawing room, on opposite ends of a cream-colored sofa, and talked. Really talked. About books, about London, about the things they had lost and the things they were still searching for. Elena found herself telling him about the orphanage, about her love of Latin, about the fear she felt when she thought about the school closing. He told her about his father's death, about the empire he had inherited too young, about the weight of expectations and the loneliness of success. Hours passed. The wine bottle emptied. The distance between them on the sofa grew smaller. I should go, Elena said eventually, though she didn't move. You should, Cassian agreed. But his hand had found hers, his fingers intertwining with hers, and neither of them pulled away. This is a terrible idea, she whispered. I know. You're dangerous. I am. I should be afraid of you. Are you? She looked at him, at the way the lamplight caught the angles of his face, at the vulnerability she could see beneath his careful control. No, I'm afraid of myself. He understood what she meant. She could see it in his eyes. He was afraid too, afraid of what he felt, of what she made him feel. They had known each other for hours, not even a full evening, and yet something had shifted, something neither of them had asked for or wanted, but could no longer ignore. He leaned closer, his free hand coming up to cup her face. Tell me to stop. I can't. Elena, I know what I'm doing. I think, maybe I don't know. She laughed, a shaky sound. I've never done this before. Been alone with a man? Any of it? I've never... She trailed off, unable to say the words. He went very still. Never. No. The confession hung between them like a key turning in a lock. For any other man, it might have been surprising. For Cassian, it was devastating. Not because of the novelty, but because of what it symbolized. Eleanor's purity, so carefully preserved, was now being offered to him, and it made him want to run and stay in equal measure, because he knew he was incapable of returning the same wholeness. His soul was too marked, too damaged, but he wanted her, not just with his body, though the desire was intense enough to make his hands shake. Cassian wanted her with the obsession of someone who wants to erase their own history through another person. And it was in that violent and sweet wanting, in that collision between shadow and light, that they began a dangerous dance. "We should stop," he said. But his thumb was tracing the curve of her cheekbone, his eyes dark with need. "Yes," she agreed. But her hand had moved to his chest, feeling his heart hammering beneath the expensive fabric of his shirt. "I'll hurt you." "I know. I'm not good. Helena, I'm not the kind of man you should be with. Maybe I don't want good. Maybe I want real." That broke something in him. He kissed her then, and it was nothing like she had imagined kisses might be. It was hungry, desperate, almost brutal in its intensity. His hand tangled in her hair, pulling her closer, and she responded with a fervor that surprised them both. She tasted of wine and something sweeter, something innocent that made him want to both protect and possess her. When they finally broke apart, both breathing hard, he rested his forehead against hers. "Stay," he said. "Just for tonight." "I won't." "We don't have to." "Just stay." She nodded, unable to speak, and he led her upstairs to his bedroom. It was as impersonal as the rest of the house, all neutral colors and expensive linens. He gave her one of his shirts to sleep in, and she changed in the bathroom, catching sight of herself in the mirror. Her cheeks were flushed, her eyes bright, her lips swollen from his kisses. She looked like a stranger. She looked alive. They lay in his bed, not touching at first, both uncertain of the boundaries. But gradually, inevitably, they moved closer. His arm went around her waist. Her head rested on his chest. She could hear his heartbeat, steady and strong, and she felt safer than she had in years, which was insane because nothing about this was safe. Everything about this was dangerous, reckless, potentially catastrophic. "Elena," he murmured into the darkness. "Yes, I don't do this. I don't bring women here. I don't connect, I know. But with you, I want to, and that terrifies me." She turned in his arms to face him, her hand coming up to touch his face. "I'm terrified too, but I'm tired of being safe, tired of protecting myself from something that might never happen. Maybe it's time to risk it. Maybe it's time to live." He kissed her again, softer this time, more tender. And they fell asleep like that, tangled together. Two damaged people, finding brief respite in each other's arms, unaware of the storm that was gathering around them, the secrets and lies and twisted connections that would soon tear them apart. Elena woke to unfamiliar sunlight streaming through unfamiliar windows. For a moment she couldn't remember where she was, and panic seized her chest. Then she felt the weight of an arm across her waist, smelled expensive cologne mixed with something warmer, more human, and memory came flooding back. Cassian, the party, the wine, the kiss. She turned carefully, not wanting to wake him, and studied his face in the morning light. Asleep, he looked younger, less guarded. The harsh lines around his mouth had softened, and there was something almost peaceful about him. She wondered when he had last slept well, truly well, without the weight of his empire pressing down on him. She wondered if she should feel ashamed of being here, of having spent the night in a stranger's bed. But she didn't. She felt instead a strange sense of rightness, as if she had been moving toward this moment for years without realizing it. His eyes opened slowly, and for a heartbeat, she saw raw vulnerability before his defenses snapped back into place. "You're still here," he said, and there was something in his voice that suggested he had expected to wake alone. "Did you think I'd sneak out? Most people do. I'm not most people." "No," he agreed, his hand moving to tuck a strand of hair behind her ear. "You're not." They lay in silence for a moment, the morning traffic outside a distant hum. Helena knew she should leave, should return to her own life, her own world, but she found herself reluctant to break this spell, this brief interlude, where she could pretend that someone like her and someone like him could exist in the same space without consequence. "What are you thinking?" Cassian asked, "that this shouldn't have happened." But I'm glad it did." He pulled her closer, his lips brushing her forehead. "I don't regret many things. I've learned not to. Regret is useless. But I have a feeling I'm going to regret you, Elena Marquez, one way or another. That's not particularly reassuring." "I'm not a reassuring man," she laughed despite herself. "No, you're really not." He ordered breakfast delivered by his housekeeper, a stern-faced woman who showed no surprise at finding Eleanor there. They ate croissants and drank coffee in his kitchen, a gleaming space of marble and steel that looked barely used. Eleanor felt acutely aware of her borrowed shirt, her bare legs, her hair tumbling loose around her shoulders. She must look a mess, she thought, nothing like the polished women Cassian probably usually entertained. But when she caught him looking at her, there was something in his eyes that made her forget her self-consciousness. "I want to see you again," he said abruptly. "Why?" Why?" He looked genuinely puzzled by the question. "Yes, why?" "I'm nobody. A Latin teacher in a failing school. You could have anyone." "Why would you want to see me again?" He set down his coffee cup with deliberate care. "Because you see me. Not my money, not my reputation, not the things I've built. You see me, and that's rare. You don't know me well enough to say that. Maybe not, but I want to. Know you, I mean. If you'll let me." Elena should have said no, should have thanked him for the evening, walked out of his pristine house and returned to her normal life. But something in her, some part that had been dormant for so long, was waking up. She wanted this, wanted him, wanted to see where this impossible thing might lead. "All right," she said. "But I have conditions." His eyebrows rose. "Conditions? I won't be a secret. I won't be hidden away or treated as if I'm something shameful. I wouldn't do that. And I won't change who I am for you. I can't afford designer clothes or expensive restaurants. I live in a bedsit in Peckham. That's my reality. Elena, I mean it, Cassian. If this is going to happen, whatever this is, it happens on equal terms. Or it doesn't happen at all." He stood and moved around the counter to stand in front of her. His hands cupped her face, tilting it up to meet his eyes. "Equal terms," he agreed. "Though I reserve the right to buy you dinner occasionally, and anything else I choose to give you. Not because I think you need it, but because I want to. Can you accept that?" "I can try. Then we have an agreement." He kissed her, and Eleanor felt that same rush of heat, of rightness, that she had felt the night before. When they finally broke apart, she was breathless, her heart racing. "I really do need to go," she said. "I have papers to grade, lessons to plan. It's Saturday. Teaching doesn't stop on weekends." He looked at her for a long moment, something unreadable in his expression. "You really love it, don't you?" "Teaching, I do. It's the only thing I've ever been good at. The only place I feel like I belong. What will you do when the school closes?" She looked away, the question hitting harder than she expected. "I don't know. Find another position somewhere, I suppose. Though jobs are scarce and Latin teachers aren't exactly in high demand. I could help. I know people—" "No." She cut him off gently but firmly. "That's not what this is about. I don't want your connections or your influence. I want to stand on my own, even if it means struggling, especially then. I've been struggling my whole life, Cassian. It's what I know, what I trust. Your world? It's beautiful, but it's not mine. I need to remember that." He didn't argue, though she could see he wanted to. Instead, he called his driver to take her home, and she dressed in her now rumpled dress from the night before, feeling like Cinderella after the ball. Except there was no glass slipper, no fairy godmother, just a borrowed moment of magic that would inevitably fade in the harsh light of reality. The drive to Peckham seemed to take hours, though it was less than 30 minutes. Eleanor watched London slide past the window, the expensive streets giving way to rougher neighbourhoods, the elegant townhouses replaced by council estates and chicken shops. This was the real London, she thought. Her London, not the gilded world of Mayfair and Belgravia, but the city where people struggled to make rent, where children came to school hungry, where dreams were small and practical, because anything larger felt dangerous. Her bedsit felt smaller than ever when she returned to it. She could fit Cassian's bedroom into it 3 times over. The contrast was almost comical. She showered in her tiny bathroom, changed into comfortable clothes and tried to return to her normal Saturday routine. But everything felt different now. She felt different, as if something inside her had shifted, unlocked and could never be quite closed again. Her phone buzzed. A text from an unknown number. "Thank you for last night. And this morning. I meant what I said. I want to see you again. Soon. See." She stared at the message for a long time before responding. "I meant what I said, too. All of it." His reply came almost immediately. "I wouldn't expect anything less. Dinner next week? Somewhere unpretentious. Your choice." She smiled despite herself. There's a pub in Borough Market. The George. Nothing fancy. Perfect. Wednesday at 7? I'll be there. She set the phone down and tried to focus on her lesson plans, but her mind kept drifting back to him, to the way he had looked at her, touched her, held her. She had spent so many years protecting herself, building walls around her heart, convincing herself that she was fine alone, and maybe she had been fine. But fine wasn't the same as happy. Fine wasn't the same as alive. Cassian made her feel alive, dangerously, recklessly alive, and she knew that was precisely why she should run. Because men like him didn't end up with women like her. Because their worlds were too different, their lives too incompatible. Because she was risking everything for something that would probably end in heartbreak, but she was going to do it anyway. The week that followed felt strange, suspended. Eleanor taught her classes, graded papers, attended a depressing meeting about the school's closure. The building had been sold to a property developer. The staff informed that their contracts would terminate at the end of term. There would be redundancy payments, they were told, assistance in finding new positions. But Elena knew the truth. There weren't enough teaching jobs in London, especially not for someone who specialized in a dead language. She would probably have to leave the city, move north where schools were more desperate for teachers, where the cost of living wasn't quite so crushing. She should have been panicking. Should have been sending out CVs, networking, planning. Instead, she found herself counting down the hours until Wednesday, until she would see Cassian again. He texted her every day. Nothing excessive, nothing demanding, just small messages that made her smile. A photo of the Thames at sunrise with the caption, "Thinking of you." A quote from Ovid, "Love is a kind of warfare." A simple, "How was your day?" She responded carefully, not wanting to seem too eager or too indifferent. It was a delicate balance, this beginning of something. Neither of them quite knew the rules, and that made it both exciting and terrifying. Wednesday arrived cloudy and cold, typical March weather in London. Elena changed her outfit 3 times before settling on dark jeans, a cream-colored jumper, and her good coat. She left her hair down, applied a touch of makeup, and looked at herself in the mirror. She looked nervous, she thought, hopeful, like someone standing on the edge of a cliff, preparing to jump. The George was busy when she arrived, full of after-work crowds and tourists drawn by its historic charm. Cassian was already there, sitting in a corner booth, looking completely out of place in his expensive suit. He stood when he saw her, and Elena felt that same jolt of attraction, of recognition that she had felt at the party. "You came," he said. "Did you think I wouldn't?" "I wasn't sure. You've had a week to think about how insane this is." "I have thought about it, and it is insane. But I'm here anyway." He smiled, a genuine smile that transformed his face. "I'm glad." They ordered food, fish and chips and pints of ale and talked like old friends. Cassian asked about her week, her students, the school closure. She asked about his work, though he was deliberately vague about details, as if he wanted to leave that part of his life outside for the evening. They discovered shared tastes in books, both preferring dark, complicated narratives to simple, happy endings. They debated the merits of living in London versus anywhere else. Elena defending the city despite its hardships, Cassian admitting he sometimes dreamed of escaping to somewhere quieter, less demanding. "So why don't you?" Elena asked. "You have the money. You could go anywhere. Because everything I've built is here. My father's legacy is here. I can't just walk away from it. Even if it makes you miserable." He looked at her sharply. "What makes you think I'm miserable?" "Because I recognize it. I've been there. Living for obligation instead of joy. It's a slow death, Cassian. And you think you found joy? Teaching in a failing school for poverty wages?" She could have been offended by the question, but she heard the genuine curiosity beneath it. "I have, actually. Maybe not all the time. Maybe not even most of the time. But in those moments when a student understands something, when language comes alive for them, when they realize they're capable of more than they thought, yes, that's joy. Small, fleeting, but real." "I envy you that," he said quietly. "Why? What brings you joy?" He was silent for a long moment. "I don't know anymore. It's been so long since I asked myself that question." Elena reached across the table and took his hand. "Then maybe it's time to start asking again." They left the pub after midnight, both reluctant for the evening to end. Cassian offered to drive her home, but Elena shook her head. "I'll take the tube." "It's fine. It's late. I've been taking the tube home late for years. I'll survive, and I know you will. But let me do this, please. Let me take care of you just a little." She wanted to argue, to insist on her independence. But there was something in his voice, a need that went beyond simple courtesy, and she found herself nodding. They drove through nighttime London, the city transformed by darkness and streetlights, and Elena felt like they were the only two people in the world. When they reached her building, Cassian looked at it with poorly concealed dismay. "You live here? Not all of us have Georgian townhouses in Belgravia. I didn't mean—" "Helena, it's not safe. It's fine. The lock on the front door works most of the time, and Mrs. Kowalski downstairs has a very loud dog. I'm perfectly safe." He looked like he wanted to argue, but held back. "Can I see you again? This weekend?" "I'd like that. I have a house in Oxfordshire. Nothing grand, just a cottage, really. Would you come with me? Just for Saturday and Sunday. I promise to be a perfect gentleman." Elena knew she should say no, knew that going away with him, being alone with him, would cross a line they couldn't uncross. But she was tired of being cautious, tired of protecting herself from life. "Yes," she said. "I'll come." He kissed her then, there in the car outside her shabby building, and it felt like a promise, like a beginning, like the end of one life and the start of another. She didn't know, couldn't know, that forces were already moving against them, that her presence at that charity gala had not been an accident, that someone was watching, waiting, preparing to use her as a weapon against Cassian, that the past they both carried would soon collide in ways neither of them could imagine. For now, in this moment, there was just the kiss, the promise, the hope. And Elena, who had learned young not to hope for too much, allowed herself this one small joy, this one reckless chance at something more. Saturday morning arrived wrapped in grey clouds and the promise of rain. Elena packed a small overnight bag with the few decent clothes she owned, feeling both excited and terrified. She had never done anything like this before, never gone away with a man, never allowed herself to be this vulnerable. The taxi Cassian had insisted on sending arrived precisely at 9, and she locked her bedsit door with trembling hands, wondering what version of herself would return on Sunday evening. The drive out of London took over an hour, the city gradually giving way to countryside. Helena watched the landscape transform through the window, concrete and steel replaced by rolling fields and ancient stone walls. She had rarely left London since arriving at St. Catherine's as a child. The countryside felt foreign, almost threatening in its openness. She was a creature of narrow streets and crowded pavements, of buses and corner shops, and the constant hum of urban life. Cassian's cottage, when they finally arrived, was nothing like she had expected. He had called it modest, but it was a beautiful Cotswold stone house with climbing roses and mullioned windows, set in at least 2 acres of gardens. It was the kind of place people featured in magazines, the kind of weekend retreat that spoke of old money and inherited privilege. Eleanor felt her stomach tighten as the car pulled up the gravel drive. He was waiting by the door, dressed casually in dark jeans and a grey jumper, looking more relaxed than she had ever seen him. When she stepped out of the car, his face lit up with genuine pleasure, and some of her nervousness eased. "You came?" he said, taking her bag. "Did you really think I wouldn't?" "Fear, sir, part of me worried you'd change your mind. Come inside. It's going to rain soon." The interior was warm and inviting, far more personal than his London house. There were books everywhere, worn paperbacks mixed with leather-bound volumes stacked on shelves and piled on side tables. A fire crackled in the stone fireplace, and the furniture looked comfortable, lived in. This was a place where someone actually existed. Eleanor thought, not just passed through. "This is beautiful," she said honestly. "It was my grandmother's. The only thing my father inherited that he didn't immediately sell or demolish. I think because his mother was still alive when he got it, and even he wouldn't cross her. She left it to me when she died, so I come here when I need to think, to escape. How often is that? Not often enough." He set her bag down and turned to face her. "I'm glad you're here, Elena, truly." She moved closer to him, drawn by something she couldn't name. "I'm glad too. Terrified but glad. Terrified of me. Of this. Of what it might mean. Of how much I want it. He pulled her into his arms and she went willingly, resting her head against his chest, hearing his heartbeat. They stood like that for a long moment, and Elena felt something settle inside her, some fundamental rightness that she had never experienced before. The rain started an hour later, a steady drumming against the windows that turned the world outside grey and intimate. Cassian cooked lunch, which surprised her. She had assumed someone like him would have staff, would never need to do anything as mundane as prepare food, but he moved around the kitchen with comfortable efficiency, making pasta with garlic and olive oil, opening a bottle of wine that probably cost more than her weekly groceries, but tasted like summer and distant vineyards. They ate at a worn wooden table in the kitchen, and Elena asked the question that had been nagging at her since she arrived. "Why me, Cassian, really? I need to understand." He set down his fork, his expression serious. "I could give you easy answers. That you're beautiful, which you are. That you're intelligent. That you challenge me, that you see me differently than everyone else. All of that is true. But the real reason?" He paused, seeming to search for words. "You make me feel something I thought I'd lost the capacity for. Hope, maybe, or possibility, when I'm with you. I'm not the man who inherited an empire built on his father's sins. I'm not the person who makes decisions that destroy communities for profit. I'm just me, whoever that is." Elena felt her throat tighten. "Your father's sins. What do you mean?" "My father was not a good man, Elena. He built D'Angelo properties through ruthlessness and connections that would make your skin crawl. When he died, when I inherited everything, I found files, documents, evidence of things I still have nightmares about. Bribes to planning officials, threats to people who opposed his developments, even—" He stopped, his jaw clenching. "Even worse things, things I'm still uncovering. Did you know while he was alive?" "No. I was kept separate from the business until I was 25. My father wanted me educated, polished, presentable. He sent me to Cambridge, made sure I learned how to move in the right circles. By the time I was brought in, he was already ill. Pancreatic cancer. He died 6 months later, and suddenly I was responsible for everything. You could have walked away. Could I? My mother was already in the psychiatric hospital by then, completely detached from reality. The business employed hundreds of people. I had responsibilities, obligations, and part of me, the worst part, wanted to prove I could do it better than he did, that I could build something clean out of the wreckage he left. Have you?" His laugh was bitter. "I try. I've cut ties with some of the worst contractors, refused to participate in certain deals. But the foundation is still rotten, Elena. You can't build a palace on corpses and expect it to stand forever. Eventually everything collapses." She reached across the table and took his hand. "You're not your father, aren't I? I still tear down buildings that people need. I still put profit ahead of community. I still make decisions that hurt people like your students, but you struggle with it. You feel guilt. That matters, does it? Does guilt change anything if the actions remain the same?" Eleanor didn't have an answer for that. Instead, she stood and moved to his side of the table, taking his face in her hands. "You're trying. That's more than most people in your position would do. Don't punish yourself for being human." He pulled her down onto his lap, burying his face in her neck. "I don't deserve you." "Maybe not, but you have me anyway. At least for this weekend." They spent the afternoon talking, really talking, the kind of deep conversation that strips away pretense and leaves only truth. Cassian told her about his childhood, about growing up in a house where love was conditional and success was the only currency that mattered. His father had been distant, demanding, impossible to please. His mother had been fragile, increasingly so as the years passed, until she finally broke completely when Cassian was 19. "What happened?" Elena asked gently. "She found out about something my father had done. I still don't know exactly what." She wouldn't talk about it, wouldn't explain. She just stopped. Stopped eating, stopped sleeping, stopped being present. Within a month, she was hospitalized. She's been there ever since, in a private facility in Surrey. She doesn't recognize me anymore. Doesn't recognize anyone. I'm so sorry. The worst part is not knowing what broke her. My father took that secret to his grave. And now I'm left wondering what I might uncover in his files that could explain it. If I even want to know. Eleanor shared her own story, the fragments she had pieced together about her mother, how she had been brought to St. Catherine's as an infant, wrapped in a blanket with nothing but a name pinned to it. Helena Maria Marquez. No surname for the mother, no father listed, no explanation. Just abandonment and silence. The nun said she came back once about 6 months later, Elena said. Sister Margaret told me years after, when I was old enough to hear it. My mother came to see me, but she wouldn't take me back. She just stood outside the gates and watched me playing in the garden. Sister Margaret tried to talk to her to understand, but she ran away. That was the last time anyone saw her. Did you ever try to find her? As an adult? What would be the point? She made her choice. She left me. Whatever reasons she had, they were more important than keeping me. You don't believe that? Elena was quiet for a moment. No, I suppose I don't. I tell myself that to make it hurt less. But the truth is I think about her constantly. Wonder who she was, what happened to her, why she couldn't keep me. The not knowing is worse than any truth could be. Would you search for her, if you had the resources? I don't know. Part of me wants to, but part of me is afraid of what I might find. What if she's dead? What if she's alive and simply doesn't care? What if knowing the truth is worse than living with the mystery? Cassian pulled her closer. I understand that fear. I live with it every day, wondering what else I'll discover about my father. What other sins I'm unknowingly carrying. They were both orphans in their way, Elena thought. Both abandoned by parents who should have protected them. Both trying to build lives out of the fragments they'd been left. Perhaps that was why they understood each other. Why they fit together despite coming from such different worlds. The rain continued through the afternoon, and they moved to the living room, sprawling on the sofa in front of the fire. Cassian read aloud from a battered copy of The Tempest he found on a shelf, doing terrible voices that made Elena laugh until her sides hurt. She reciprocated by reciting Catullus in Latin, translating the explicit love poems with academic precision that somehow made them even more erotic. I had no idea Latin could sound like that, Cassian said, his voice rough. It's a language of passion, of precision. Everything has its place, its purpose. Nothing is wasted. Like you. What do you mean? You're precise, deliberate, nothing wasted, nothing false. You say exactly what you mean, feel exactly what you show. There's no performance, no manipulation. It's intoxicating. Elena felt heat rise in her cheeks. I wouldn't know how to be any other way. I know. That's what makes it so rare. He kissed her, and this time there was more urgency to it, more need. His hands moved to her waist, pulling her closer, and Elena responded with a hunger that surprised her. She had spent so many years holding herself apart, keeping herself safe, and now she wanted nothing more than to break down every wall she had ever built. Cassian, she whispered against his mouth, tell me to stop. No. Elena, I need you to be sure, because once we cross this line, I'm sure. I've never been more sure of anything. He stood, lifting her with him, and carried her upstairs to a bedroom that was all exposed beams and white linens. The rain was louder here, more insistent, and the grey light coming through the windows cast everything in soft shadow. Cassian set her down gently, his hands trembling slightly, and Elena realized he was as nervous as she was. I've never done this, she said, needing him to understand. I don't know what I'm doing. We'll figure it out together. He cupped her face, his thumb tracing her lower lip. I'll go slowly. We can stop any time you want. I don't want to stop. He undressed her carefully, reverently, as if she were something precious and fragile. Each piece of clothing removed felt like shedding a layer of protection until she stood before him in only her underwear, feeling more exposed than she ever had in her life. But when she looked at his face, saw the raw desire mixed with tenderness, her fear receded. She reached for his jumper, pulling it over his head, running her hands over the warm skin beneath. He was lean and muscled, his body bearing the marks of someone who worked out more from discipline than enjoyment. There was a scar across his ribs, pale and puckered, and she traced it with her fingers. What happened? Appendectomy when I was 16. Nothing dramatic. She kissed the scar, feeling him shudder under her touch. They moved to the bed, and Cassian kept his promise, going slowly, checking in with her constantly, making sure she was comfortable, that she wanted to continue. His patience was almost agonizing, but Elena appreciated it, needed it. This was uncharted territory, and she was grateful to have a guide who cared about her experience as much as his own. When they finally came together, there was pain, sharp and brief, but also something else. A sense of completion, of rightness, as if she had been waiting her entire life for this moment, this person. Cassian held her through it, murmuring words of comfort and encouragement, his own control clearly tested but holding firm. And then the pain faded, replaced by pleasure, by sensation, by a connection so profound it bordered on terrifying. Eleanor had read about this, of course, had taught the love poetry of the ancients, but knowing about it intellectually was nothing compared to the reality. She understood now why poets had spent millennia trying to capture this feeling in words, why it drove people to madness, to greatness, to destruction. Afterwards they lay tangled together, both breathing hard, both transformed. Elena felt tears on her cheeks, and wasn't sure when she had started crying. Cassian kissed them away gently, his own eyes suspiciously bright. "Are you all right?" he asked. "I don't know. I feel everything." "Is that normal?" "I think so, I hope so. Because I feel it too." They stayed in bed as evening fell, talking in whispers, touching with the wonder of new lovers discovering each other. Cassian ordered food from a nearby pub, and they ate it wrapped in blankets, feeding each other chips and laughing at nothing in particular. Eleanor felt happy in a way she couldn't remember ever feeling before. Not content, not satisfied, but genuinely, completely happy. But as night deepened and they lay in the darkness, Elena's phone buzzed on the nightstand. She almost ignored it, but something made her check. A text from an unknown number. "You should ask him about St. Catherine's, about what his father did, about the real reason your school is closing." Elena stared at the message, her blood turning cold. "Cassian? Do you know anything about St. Catherine's? The orphanage where I grew up." She felt him go still beside her. "Why do you ask? Just answer the question, please." He sat up, turning on the bedside lamp, and she saw guilt flash across his face before he could hide it. "Elena, you knew about St. Catherine's." "Yes, but not until recently, I swear. I've been trying to find the right time to tell you." "Tell me what?" He ran a hand through his hair, looking suddenly exhausted. "St. Catherine's was sold to D'Angelo Properties 12 years ago. My father bought it, demolished it, built luxury flats on the site. It was before I joined the company. I had no idea until a few weeks ago when I was going through old files." Eleanor felt like she'd been punched in the stomach. "Your father destroyed my home. It was already closed. The nuns had moved to a different location. The building was empty. But it was my home, Cassian. The only place I belonged. And your father tore it down for profit. I know. And I'm sorry. If I could change it, I would. There's more, isn't there?" "That text mentioned my school, St. Dominic's." His silence was answer enough. "Tell me," she demanded, her voice hard. "D'Angelo Properties owns the building. We're the ones who terminated the lease. We're the ones forcing the closure." Elena scrambled out of bed, grabbing her clothes, needing to put distance between them. "You knew this whole time? When you met me at that party? When you asked me out? When you brought me here? You knew your company was destroying my livelihood?" "I didn't know about you specifically until after the party. But Elena, it's just business. It's not personal." "Not personal?" Her voice was shaking with rage and hurt. "How is it not personal? You're taking away the one thing that gives my life meaning. You're taking away my students' futures. And you stand there and tell me it's just business? The building is worth more as luxury apartments. The school wasn't financially viable anyway. It was going to close eventually. So that makes it all right. Because it's inevitable, you might as well profit from it? That's not what I meant. Isn't it, though? Isn't that exactly how people like you justify what you do? It would happen anyway, so why not make money from other people's suffering?" Cassian flinched as if she had struck him. "People like me?" "Yes, people who have so much they can't even see what they're taking from others. People who think money solves everything, makes everything acceptable. That's not fair, Elena, you know me. You know I'm not... Do I? Because right now I'm not sure I know you at all. The man I thought I knew wouldn't have hidden this from me, wouldn't have let me walk into this blind. I was going to tell you. I just needed time to figure out how. How long have you known? How long have you been lying to me? I found out the day after the party. I've been trying to fix it, to find a way to help without making it seem like charity. A week. You've known for a week and said nothing. While you were texting me, taking me to dinner, bringing me here, sleeping with me, you knew this whole time and said nothing. The accusation hung in the air between them, ugly and undeniable. Elena finished dressing with shaking hands. Her vision blurred with tears she refused to let fall. "Where are you going?" Cassian asked. "Back to London." "Call me a car." "Elena, please, let's talk about this." "There's nothing to talk about. You made your choice. You chose to protect yourself, to hide the truth because it was convenient, just like your father, just like everyone in your world." That struck home. She saw him pale, saw the words hit him like physical blows. "I'm not my father, aren't you? You're doing exactly what he did, taking what you want without caring who gets hurt. The only difference is you feel guilty about it afterwards. But guilt doesn't change anything, does it? Guilt doesn't bring back St. Catherine's. Guilt doesn't save my school. Guilt is just a way to make yourself feel better while continuing to do terrible things. Elena, call me a car." "Cassian, please, I can't be here anymore." He did. His face carved from stone, his eyes empty. They waited in silence, the happiness of hours ago now feeling like a cruel joke. When the car arrived, Elena grabbed her bag and walked out without looking back, though every step felt like tearing something vital out of her chest. The drive back to London was endless. Elena stared out the window, watching the darkness slide past, and felt the weight of her stupidity pressing down on her. She had let herself hope. Let herself believe that someone like her could be with someone like him without consequence. Let herself forget that their worlds were fundamentally incompatible, that the gulf between them was unbridgeable. She had given him her virginity, her trust, her carefully guarded heart, and he had been lying to her the entire time. Not outright lies, perhaps, but lies of omission, which were somehow worse. He had let her walk into this relationship blind, knowing that his family's business had destroyed her past and was currently destroying her future. When she finally reached her bedsit, it was past midnight. She climbed the stairs to her flat, let herself in, and stood in the middle of the small room, feeling more alone than she had in years. Her phone buzzed. Multiple texts from Cassian. "I'm sorry. Please let me explain. I never meant to hurt you. You have to believe me." She deleted them all without responding and blocked his number. Then she threw her phone across the room, heard it crack against the wall, and finally let herself cry. Great, heaving sobs that shook her entire body, that came from somewhere deep and primal. She cried for the orphanage that was gone, for the school that was closing, for the innocence she had given to someone who didn't deserve it. But mostly she cried for what she had allowed herself to want, to hope for, to believe was possible. Because the worst part wasn't that Cassian had lied. The worst part was that despite everything, despite the betrayal and the hurt and the anger, she still loved him, had fallen in love with him without even realizing it, and that made her the biggest fool of all. Morning came grey and cold, and Elena dragged herself out of bed feeling hollowed out, empty. She had Monday's lessons to plan, papers to grade, a life to continue living. The world didn't stop because her heart was broken. Children still needed to be taught. Bills still needed to be paid. She couldn't afford the luxury of falling apart. But as she sat at her desk, trying to focus on Latin conjugations, her eyes kept drifting to her broken phone, to the last message she had seen before blocking Cassian. The anonymous text about St. Catherine's. Someone had known. Someone had wanted her to know. Which meant this wasn't over. Whatever was happening, whatever connection existed between Cassian's world and her own, it was bigger than just a property deal gone wrong. Someone was watching. Someone was waiting. And Elena had the distinct, terrifying feeling that she had just been pulled into something far more dangerous than a broken heart. The following week passed in a haze of grey skies and greyer emotions. Elena threw herself into teaching with almost manic energy, staying late at school, volunteering for extra duties, anything to avoid being alone with her thoughts. Her students noticed something was wrong. Even the most disruptive ones were subdued in her presence, sensing the brittleness beneath her professional facade. On Wednesday, the headmaster called her into his office. Mr. Pembridge was a weary man in his 60s, counting down the days until retirement, and he looked at Elena with something like pity as she sat across from him. "I've had an interesting phone call," he said, steeping his fingers. From D'Angelo Properties. Elena's stomach dropped. Oh? They're offering to extend the lease. Another 5 years at reduced rent. They're also willing to fund renovations, updated equipment, even additional staff positions. He paused, watching her carefully. The offer came with a specific stipulation. That you remain on staff as head of the classics department. No. The word came out flat, final. Elena, this could save the school. Save your job and everyone else's. Don't you want to at least consider... It's charity. Guilt money. And I won't be bought. This isn't about you, Miss Marquez. This is about 40 teachers and 300 students who will have nowhere to go if this school closes. Can you really put your pride above their futures? The words hit like a slap. Elena stood abruptly, her chair scraping against the floor. Tell Mr. D'Angelo thank you, but no. The school doesn't need a benefactor with a guilty conscience. Find another solution. She walked out before he could respond, before he could point out what she already knew. That there was no other solution. That she was condemning the school and everyone in it because she couldn't separate her personal feelings from professional reality. That she was being selfish, petty, exactly the kind of person she had always despised. But accepting Cassian's money felt like accepting defeat. Like admitting that he had been right all along, that everything could be solved with enough wealth thrown at the problem. Like agreeing that his father's sins could be erased with a generous check and good intentions. Her phone, now repaired but still silent from Cassian, buzzed that evening with a new message from the same unknown number. The pub, the Anchor in Rotherhithe, tomorrow at 8. Come alone if you want the truth about your mother. Elena stared at the message for a long time. Every instinct screamed that this was dangerous, potentially stupid. Meeting an anonymous contact who had already demonstrated knowledge of her life, her history, her connection to Cassian. But the mention of her mother was irresistible. After 26 years of silence, of empty spaces where answers should be, someone was offering her the one thing she had always wanted. Truth. She went. The Anchor was a dingy riverside pub that smelled of old beer and damp wood. Eleanor arrived early, choosing a corner table where she could watch the door. She ordered a gin and tonic she didn't want and waited, her heart hammering against her ribs. The man who approached her table at precisely 8 o'clock was not what she expected. He was in his late 50s, well-dressed in a way that suggested money but not ostentation. Silver hair, shrewd grey eyes, and a smile that never quite reached them. Miss Marquez, thank you for coming. His accent was upper-class, educated. My name is Marcus Thornton. I was a business associate of the late Victor D'Angelo. Elena's hands tightened around her glass. What do you want? To give you information, to help you understand the man you've been spending time with. May I sit? She nodded curtly, and he settled across from her with the careful movements of someone who had rehearsed this encounter. 26 years ago, Thornton began, Victor D'Angelo was involved in a property deal in Suffolk, a large-scale development that required clearing several buildings, including a women's shelter. The shelter housed vulnerable women, many of them victims of domestic violence, some of them pregnant or with young children. Victor wanted them out quickly. Legal eviction would have taken months, maybe years, so he took a different approach. Elena felt cold spreading through her chest. What approach? He hired people to make the shelter uninhabitable, cut utilities, orchestrated break-ins, created an atmosphere of fear. Within 6 weeks, most of the women had left. But there was one who refused to go, a Spanish woman named Maria Marquez. She had a 7-month-old daughter and nowhere else to turn. She organized the remaining women, contacted lawyers, tried to fight back. Eleanor couldn't breathe. My mother. Yes, Victor saw her as a problem to be eliminated. He sent people to threaten her, to make it clear that resistance would have consequences. And when threats didn't work, Thornton paused, his expression grim. There was a fire. The shelter burned to the ground. Official investigation ruled it accidental, a faulty gas line. But those of us who knew Victor understood the truth. He killed her. Elena's voice was barely a whisper. Not directly. Victor never dirtied his own hands, but he gave the order. Maria Marquez died in that fire, along with 2 other women. Their deaths were written off as tragic accidents. The development went ahead as planned. Victor made millions. Elena felt like she was going to be sick. Why are you telling me this now? After all these years? Because his son is following in his footsteps. Oh, Cassian is more subtle, more careful. He pretends to have a conscience. But he's still tearing down buildings, still displacing communities, still profiting from other people's misery. And I thought you deserved to know exactly who you've been sleeping with. The cruelty of that last statement snapped Elena out of her shock. You sent me that text during the weekend. You knew where I was, what we were doing. You've been watching me. I've been watching Cassian. You were simply collateral. Why? What's your agenda in all this? Thornton's smile turned sharp. Victor D'Angelo destroyed my life too, Miss Marquez. He ruined my business, stole my ideas, left me bankrupt and disgraced. I've spent 20 years rebuilding, waiting for the right moment. And then Cassian's father died, and I saw my opportunity. The son is not the father, but he carries the same blood, runs the same company, profits from the same crimes. I intend to bring D'Angelo Properties to its knees, and you're going to help me. I'm not helping you do anything. Really? Even knowing what his father did to your mother? Even knowing that every pound Cassian has ever spent was built on your mother's grave? Cassian isn't his father. He didn't know about any of this, didn't he? Are you sure? Or are you simply too infatuated to see the truth? Elena stood abruptly. I'm leaving. Wait. Thornton pulled a folder from his briefcase and slid it across the table. I thought you might react this way. So I brought proof. Photographs, documents, witness statements. Everything you need to know about what really happened to your mother. Take it, read it, and then decide whether Cassian D'Angelo deserves your loyalty. Elena stared at the folder, her hand trembling as she reached for it. If you think this will make me help destroy him, you're wrong. I don't need your help, Miss Marquez. I just need you to stop protecting him. Stop standing in the way of justice. Your mother deserves that much, doesn't she? Elena grabbed the folder and walked out without another word. She made it 3 blocks before she had to stop, leaning against a wall, fighting the urge to vomit. Her mother. She finally had a name, a face, a story, and it was so much worse than anything she had imagined. She took the folder home and spent the night reading through it. Photographs of a young woman with dark hair and eyes that looked heartbreakingly like her own. Maria Marquez, 23 years old, pregnant and alone, trying to fight a system designed to crush people like her. Letters she had written to lawyers, to housing authorities, to anyone who would listen. Desperate pleas for help that had been ignored or dismissed. And then the fire. News clippings with grainy photos of the burned building. Witness statements that mentioned hearing glass breaking in the middle of the night before the flames started. Insurance reports that were suspiciously quick to rule it accidental. Victor D'Angelo's name never appeared directly in any of the documents, but his shadow was everywhere. The development that replaced the shelter. The profits. The lies. By morning, Elena felt emptied out, hollowed. Her mother hadn't abandoned her. Her mother had died fighting for her, trying to give her a safe place to grow up. And the man responsible, the man whose blood and money had built the empire she had been so close to accepting, had never faced consequences. Had died wealthy and respected, his crimes buried under glass towers and political connections. She called in sick to school, something she never did, and spent the day walking aimlessly through London. She found herself in Southwark, standing in front of a luxury apartment building with floor-to-ceiling windows and a doorman in a crisp uniform. According to Thornton's documents, this was where the shelter had stood, where her mother had died. Now it was million-pound flats for bankers and lawyers, a monument to gentrification and selective memory. Elena pressed her hand against the cold stone facade and wept. For the mother she had never known, for the life they might have had together, for the injustice of a world where men like Victor D'Angelo could murder and profit, while women like Maria Marquez were erased from history. Her phone rang. An unknown number, but she answered anyway, past caring. Elena, Cassian's voice raw and exhausted. Please don't hang up. How did you get this number? It doesn't matter. I need to talk to you. There are things you need to know, things I've discovered. About my mother, about how your father killed her. Silence. Then carefully, you know. Someone was kind enough to enlighten me, with extensive documentation. Tell me, Cassian, did you know? When you approached me at that party, when you took me to bed, did you know what your father had done? No, God, no. Helena, I swear I only found out yesterday. I've been going through my father's private files, the ones he kept locked in his study. I found references to the shelter, to the fire, to payoffs and threats. I've been trying to reach you since last night to tell you to explain. Explain what? That your entire fortune is built on murder? That every time you touched me, you did it with blood money? It's not my blood. I didn't do this, but you benefit from it. You live in houses he bought, drive cars he paid for, run a company he built on corpses. How is that different? Because I'm trying to make it right. Elena, please, I'm trying to fix this. You can't fix this. You can't bring my mother back. You can't undo 26 years of my believing I was abandoned when really I was orphaned by your family's greed. Let me try. Let me make restitution, set up a foundation in her name, fund programs for vulnerable women. More guilt money. Is that your answer to everything? Throw enough cash at a problem until it goes away. What else can I do? His voice broke. Tell me what you want me to do and I'll do it. Walk away from the company. Donate everything. Turn myself in for my father's crimes. Whatever you need. I don't need anything from you, Cassian. I need you to leave me alone. I need to process this without you in my head, confusing everything. Elena. She hung up and blocked that number too. Then she sat on a bench across from the luxury building and cried until she had no tears left. 3 days passed in a blur of grief and rage. Elena went through the motions of living, teaching her classes with mechanical precision, eating because her body demanded it, sleeping in brief, nightmare-filled snatches. She ignored calls from Mr. Pembridge, ignored knocks on her door, ignored the world beyond the narrow tunnel of her pain. On Saturday morning, there was an envelope slipped under her door. Inside was a letter in Cassian's handwriting, his usually perfect script shaky and uneven. Elena, I know you don't want to hear from me. I understand why, but I need you to know the truth, all of it, even if it costs me any chance I might have had with you. I've spent the last week investigating my father's business dealings, and what I've found sickens me. The shelter wasn't an isolated incident. There were dozens of similar situations over the years. Buildings burned, people threatened, lives destroyed, all for profit. My father was a monster. I've known he was ruthless, but I never imagined the extent of his cruelty. I've contacted the families of the victims I could identify. I'm offering restitution, far more than any court would award. It won't bring anyone back, but it's something. I'm also restructuring D'Angelo properties from the ground up. Any projects that involve displacing vulnerable communities are being cancelled, regardless of the financial loss. I'm establishing a foundation to provide affordable housing, legal aid for tenants, support for domestic violence victims. Everything my father destroyed I want to rebuild. Not to assuage my guilt, though I have plenty of that, and not to win you back, though losing you is the worst punishment I could imagine. I'm doing it because it's right, because I have the power to make things better, and choosing not to use that power would make me complicit in my father's crimes. You were right about me, Elena. I was becoming him, hiding behind excuses of inevitability and market forces, pretending I had no choice, when really I was just too cowardly to choose differently. You made me see that. You made me want to be better. I love you. I should have said it when I had the chance, when you were still in my arms before everything fell apart. I love you with a desperation that terrifies me. You're the first person who ever made me feel like I could be more than my father's son, more than the empire I inherited. But I understand if you can't forgive me. If knowing where my money comes from, what it cost, makes it impossible for you to look at me without seeing blood. I just want you to know that even if I never see you again, you changed me. You made me believe in redemption, in second chances, in the possibility of building something good from terrible foundations. Thank you for that. Even if it's all I get to keep, thank you. Yours always, Cassian. Eleanor read the letter 3 times, her heart warring with her head. Everything he said sounded sincere, and she wanted desperately to believe him. But trusting Cassian meant trusting that he was different from his father, that blood and inheritance didn't determine destiny. It meant forgiving him for secrets kept and lies told. It meant accepting that love could exist alongside horror, that she could care for someone whose family had destroyed hers. She didn't know if she was capable of that kind of forgiveness. Her phone buzzed. Marcus Thornton. Have you seen the news? Your lover is making quite the spectacle. Elena turned on her laptop and searched Cassian's name. The results flooded her screen. Headlines screaming about scandal, betrayal, corporate housecleaning. Cassian had gone public with everything. Not just his father's crimes, but his own complicity, his plans for restitution, his complete restructuring of the company. He had essentially destroyed his own reputation, his business relationships, his standing in the community. Stock in D'Angelo Properties had plummeted. Industry peers were calling for his resignation. Lawyers were circling, looking for opportunities to sue. He had sacrificed everything. For truth. For justice. For her. Elena felt something crack inside her chest. This wasn't a calculated move to win her back. This was professional suicide. Cassian had to know that coming clean would cost him nearly everything. But he had done it anyway because it was right. Because she had made him see that some things mattered more than profit. Another text from Thornton. Perfect timing, really. D'Angelo Properties is vulnerable now. Easy to acquire, to dismantle. You've done well, Miss Marquez. Better than I expected. Elena stared at the message, understanding dawning like cold water. I didn't do anything. Didn't you? You got close to him, made him fall for you, convinced him to tear down everything his father built. You were the perfect weapon. I just pointed you in the right direction. You used me. Rage bloomed in her chest, hot and clarifying. You manipulated both of us. Made me hate him, made him destroy himself. All so you could sweep in and take his company. Business is war, Miss Marquez. Sometimes you need to sacrifice pawns to take the king. I'm not a pawn, and neither is Cassian. Aren't you? You're both so predictable, so emotional, so easy to manipulate. The orphan seeking justice for her dead mother. The guilt-ridden son trying to atone for his father's sins. I barely had to do anything. You destroyed each other beautifully. Elena's hands were shaking. What really happened to my mother, Thornton? The whole truth. I told you the truth. You told me a version of it, but you left something out, didn't you? Some detail that didn't fit your narrative. Silence. Then carefully, the fire was an accident after all. Victor wanted the shelter burned, paid for it to happen, but the men he hired botched the job. They didn't know anyone was still inside. Your mother and the others were supposed to be gone. It was meant to be insurance fraud, not murder. That doesn't make it better. No, but it makes Victor D'Angelo careless rather than murderous. Still a crime, still worthy of punishment. But not quite the monster I painted him as. You lied to me. Used my mother's death as a weapon. I gave you the truth that mattered. Victor D'Angelo was responsible for her death. That much is undeniable. And Cassian, what's your plan for him now? To take everything he has left. His company, his reputation, his future. He'll be lucky to avoid prison when I'm done. The documents I've prepared paint a picture of complicity, of active participation in his father's crimes. Whether it's true or not hardly matters. The court of public opinion has already convicted him. I'll tell him. I'll tell him everything you've done. Go ahead. Who will he believe? The woman who broke his heart, or the mountain of evidence I've carefully constructed? I've been planning this for 20 years, Miss Marquez. I've thought of every contingency. You can't stop me. Elena hung up and immediately tried to call Cassian. His phone went straight to voicemail, as did his office line. She searched for recent news and found it. Cassian had been admitted to hospital early that morning. Cause unknown. The tabloids were speculating everything from a breakdown to a suicide attempt. Elena grabbed her coat and ran. The private hospital in Chelsea was all hushed corridors and expensive artwork. Eleanor talked her way past the front desk by claiming to be family and found Cassian's room on the 4th floor. A security guard stood outside, but he let her pass after she gave her name. Cassian was sitting up in bed, pale and drawn, an IV line in his arm. His eyes widened when he saw her. Elena? How did you... Are you all right? The news said, I'm fine. Just exhaustion and dehydration. I haven't been sleeping, haven't been eating. My assistant found me passed out in my office and panicked. It's nothing serious. She moved closer to the bed, her earlier rage at Thornton transforming into something else. Fear, concern, love, though she wasn't ready to admit it. You look terrible. I feel worse. He tried to smile and failed. Did you get my letter? Yes, and I don't know what to think about any of this. But, Cassian, there's something you need to know. Marcus Thornton. Do you know that name? His expression darkened. My father's former partner. They had a falling out years ago. Why? He's been orchestrating this, all of it. He sent me the information about my mother, arranged for me to be at that charity gala, made sure we met. He's been manipulating us from the beginning. Cassian closed his eyes. To destroy me. To destroy your company. To take everything your father built. He's been using us, Cassian. Using my pain and your guilt as weapons. It doesn't matter. What? Whether Thornton manipulated us or not, the facts remain the same. My father was a criminal. I benefited from his crimes. I deserve whatever consequences come. No. Eleanor surprised herself with the vehemence of her response. You don't deserve to be destroyed for your father's sins. You didn't choose this legacy. You didn't ask to inherit blood money. And you're trying to make it right. That has to count for something, does it? Elena, my family killed your mother. How can you stand there and defend me? Because you're not your family. Because you're trying to be better. Because... She took a breath. Because despite everything, despite the lies and the hurt, and the impossible situation we're in, I still love you. And I'm furious about it. And I don't know if we can ever make this work, but I can't let Thornton destroy you. I won't. Cassian stared at her, his eyes bright with unshed tears. You love me? Apparently I'm an idiot. Elena, don't say anything yet. We have bigger problems. Thornton said he has documents, evidence that will make you look complicit in your father's crimes. Whether it's true or not, he can ruin you with it. We need to figure out how to stop him. Cassian was quiet for a moment, thinking. Then his expression cleared. The files. My father's private files. If Thornton was his partner, there must be documentation of his involvement. If we can prove he knew about the shelter, the fire, the other crimes, then we can fight back. Make it mutually assured destruction. Where are the files? My father's study in the Belgravia house. Locked safe behind a false panel. I only found it last week. Then let's go get them. Elena, you don't have to do this. You don't owe me anything. I'm not doing it for you. I'm doing it for my mother. For all the people your father and Thornton hurt. For the truth. She held out her hand. Now get out of that bed. We have work to do. He took her hand, and Elena felt the familiar jolt of connection, of rightness, despite everything that stood between them. They weren't healed. Their problems weren't solved. But they were together, united against a common enemy. And maybe, just maybe, that was enough to start with. Cassian discharged himself against medical advice, signing forms while his doctor protested about electrolyte imbalances and the need for rest. Helena waited by the door, acutely aware that this was the first time they had been alone together since that devastating night in Oxfordshire. The air between them was charged with unspoken words, unresolved feelings, and the weight of revelations that had shattered and reformed them both. The drive to Belgravia was silent, except for the rain drumming against the car windows. London slid past in shades of grey, the city wrapped in that particular melancholy that seemed to mirror their mood. Eleanor watched Cassian from the corner of her eye, noting the dark circles under his eyes, the tightness around his mouth, the way his hands gripped the steering wheel with white-knuckled intensity. He looked like a man holding himself together through sheer will, and she wondered how long he could maintain that control before something broke. You should have told me, she said finally. About St. Catherine's, about the school. From the beginning. I know. I would have been angry, but at least I would have known the truth. At least I would have had a choice about whether to get involved with you. Would you have? Gotten involved, I mean. If you had known. Elena considered the question honestly. I don't know. Probably not. Which is why you didn't tell me, isn't it? Partly. But also because I was a coward. I convinced myself I was protecting you, that what you didn't know couldn't hurt you. But really I was protecting myself. From your judgment, from your rejection. From having to face what my family had done to yours. We can't build anything on lies, Cassian. Even lies of omission. I know that now. He glanced at her, his expression raw. If we somehow get through this, if we find a way forward, I promise you complete honesty. Even when it's painful. Especially when it's painful. That's a lot of ifs. It is. But I'm asking you to consider the possibility anyway. That we might have a future. That love might be enough to bridge the gap between our worlds. Elena wanted to say yes immediately, wanted to close that gap and damn the consequences, but she had learned the hard way that love alone wasn't enough. I don't know if I can trust you again. I don't know if I can separate you from everything your name represents, from the harm your family has caused. I'm not asking you to forget. I'm asking you to let me prove I'm different, to give me the chance to earn back what I threw away. And if you can't, If the damage is too deep, then at least I'll know I tried. At least I'll have fought for the one good thing I've ever had in my life. They pulled up to the Belgravia house, and Elena felt a wave of memory wash over her. The last time she had been here, she had been hopeful, naive, believing that someone like her could belong in a world like this. Now she knew better. Now she understood that belonging required more than desire. It required sacrifice, compromise, and a willingness to live with ghosts. The house was dark and cold, as if it sensed its owner's disgrace. Cassian led her through familiar rooms that now felt alien, hostile. Everything here had been bought with blood money, every piece of art and furniture a testament to Victor D'Angelo's crimes. Elena wondered how Cassian could stand to live here, surrounded by evidence of his father's corruption. "I'm selling it," Cassian said, as if reading her thoughts. "The house, the cottage in Oxfordshire, everything personal. I'm keeping only what I need for the business restructuring. The rest will go to restitution funds. You don't have to do that." "Yes, I do. I can't build something new while living in the old man's shadow. Every time I walk through this house, I see him. Hear his voice, remember his lessons. I need to be free of it all." They climbed the stairs to Victor's study, a room Cassian admitted he had avoided for months after his father's death. It was exactly what Elena had expected. Dark wood paneling, leather furniture, walls lined with books that had probably never been read. A desk the size of a small car dominated the space, its surface covered in files and papers that Cassian had clearly been working through obsessively. "The safe is behind here," Cassian said, moving to a section of bookshelf. He pressed something, and the entire unit swung outward on hidden hinges, revealing a wall safe with an electronic keypad. He entered a code, and the safe opened with a soft click. Inside were stacks of files, some dating back decades. Cassian pulled them out carefully, spreading them across his father's desk. "I've been through most of these. The information about your mother's shelter is in this one." He handed her a file, his hands shaking slightly. "I'm sorry you have to see this. Sorry for all of it." Elena opened the file and found herself looking at photographs of the shelter before the fire, a modest building with peeling paint and bars on the windows, but clean maintained. There were photos of the women who lived there too, including several of her mother. Maria Marquez at 23, dark-eyed and determined, holding an infant Elena in her arms. Elena felt tears sting her eyes. She had spent her entire life wondering what her mother looked like, and here was the answer. She looked like Elena herself, or rather, Elena looked like her. Same eyes, same chin, same expression of fierce protectiveness. "She was beautiful," Cassian said softly. "She was." Elena traced her finger over the photograph, wishing she could reach through time and warn her mother. Save her, change everything. But the past was immutable, and all the wishing in the world wouldn't bring Maria Marquez back. There were other documents in the file. Letters Maria had written, increasingly desperate, to housing authorities and lawyers. Memos from Victor D'Angelo discussing the shelter problem and various solutions. And finally, a contract with a security company dated 2 weeks before the fire, with a handwritten note in the margin, "Whatever it takes. Make them leave." "This proves intent," Elena said. "Even if the fire wasn't meant to kill anyone, your father knew he was using illegal methods to force them out. There's more." Cassian pulled out another file. "Thornton's name appears in several of these documents. He was involved in at least 3 of my father's worst projects, including the shelter. He knew what was happening. He might have even suggested some of the tactics." Elena read through the documents, her anger at Thornton growing with each page. He hadn't just been Victor's partner. He had been his accomplice, his enabler, and now he was playing the victim, using her mother's death as ammunition, while conveniently forgetting his own culpability. "Why did they fall out?" Elena asked. "Your father and Thornton. Money, according to the files. Thornton felt he wasn't getting his fair share of the profits. He tried to blackmail my father, threatened to expose the illegal activities unless he was given a larger stake in the company. My father refused and cut him out entirely, destroyed his reputation, made sure no one in the industry would work with him. So this is about revenge and money. It always is with men like Thornton." They spent the next hour going through every file, documenting evidence of Thornton's involvement, building a case that would make any move against Cassian mutually destructive. Elena found herself working alongside Cassian with surprising ease. their minds sinking as they pieced together the puzzle of corruption and conspiracy. "This is enough," Cassian said finally. "Enough to expose Thornton, to prove he was just as guilty as my father. Maybe more so since he's now pretending to be righteous. What will you do with it?" "Give it to the authorities, along with everything else. My father's crimes, Thornton's involvement, all of it. Let the law decide what happens next. That could destroy you too. You said yourself some of these files implicate the current company. I don't care anymore. I'm tired of protecting guilty people, tired of choosing profit over justice. If D'Angelo Properties has to fall to set things right, then that's what happens." Elena studied him, this man who looked so exhausted, so worn down by the weight of inherited sins. "You're not the monster Thornton painted you as. You're not even the man I thought you were when we first met. What am I then? Farcido seems someone trying to be better, someone willing to sacrifice everything for what's right. That's rare, Cassian, especially in your world. I'm only like this because of you. You showed me there was another way, that I could choose differently. No, I just held up a mirror. You made the choice yourself." They were standing close now, close enough that Elena could see the flecks of gold in his dark eyes, could smell the familiar scent of his cologne mixed with hospital antiseptic. She knew she should step back, maintain distance, but her body wouldn't obey. "Elena," he whispered, may I hold you? Just for a moment. I need to know you're real, that this isn't another dream." She nodded, unable to speak, and he pulled her into his arms. They stood like that in his father's study, surrounded by evidence of old crimes and old grief, holding on to each other as if they could anchor one another against the storm still raging around them. "I love you," Cassian murmured into her hair. "I know I don't deserve you. Know that everything between us is complicated and possibly impossible. But I love you. I need you to know that. I know. I love you too. God help me, but I do." He pulled back just enough to look at her face, his thumb wiping away tears she hadn't realized were falling. "Then help me figure out how to make this work. How to be worthy of you. You start by being honest, always, even when it hurts. I can do that. And by understanding that I come with complications too. I'm not easy, Cassian. I'm stubborn and proud, and I won't be kept or controlled or treated like something fragile. I don't want to control you. I want to stand beside you as equals, as partners. Partners." Elena tested the word and found she liked it. "I could live with that. Does that mean you'll give us another chance? A real one this time, built on truth? It means I'm willing to try, to see if love is enough to overcome everything else. But Cassian, if you lie to me again, if you hide things or make decisions for me, we're done. I mean it. I've lived through too much loss to accept anything less than complete honesty. You have my word. Complete honesty even when it's difficult. Especially then." They sealed the promise with a kiss, tentative at first, then deepening into something more desperate, more needy. Elena felt herself melting into him, her body remembering what her mind had tried to forget. The way he touched her, the way he made her feel seen and wanted and valued. It would be so easy to give in, to let passion override reason, to pretend that love alone could solve all their problems. But they had work to do. Thornton was still out there, still plotting, and the truth about Victor D'Angelo's crimes still needed to be exposed. They broke apart reluctantly, both breathing hard, and Cassian rested his forehead against hers. "We should go, take these files somewhere safe and figure out our next move." "Where?" "I have a flat." "In Clerkenwell. Small, anonymous. Somewhere my father never touched. We can work from there, decide how to handle Thornton and the authorities." Elena nodded and helped him gather the files, carefully organizing them into boxes. As they worked, she found another photograph of her mother, this one showing Maria laughing, her head thrown back in joy. Helena stared at it, memorizing every detail. Her mother had been happy once, before Victor D'Angelo had destroyed her life. That happiness had been stolen, erased, forgotten by everyone, except a daughter who had never known her. But Elena would remember now. Would make sure that Maria Marquez's story was told, that her death meant something. She would fight for justice, not just for her mother, but for all the nameless, faceless people crushed by men like Victor D'Angelo and Marcus Thornton, people who had been deemed expendable in the pursuit of profit and power. And she would do it alongside Cassian, this complicated, damaged man who was trying so hard to be better than his bloodline. Together, they would expose the truth. Together, they would face whatever consequences came. Together, they might just find redemption in the wreckage of their father's sins. As they left the house carrying boxes of evidence, Elena looked back once at the imposing Georgian facade. This place had represented everything she could never have, everything that separated her world from Cassian's. But now she understood that the real division wasn't between rich and poor, powerful and powerless. It was between those who chose justice over convenience, truth over comfort, love over fear. And she had made her choice. Whatever came next, whatever battles they still had to fight, she would face them with Cassian by her side. Not because he was perfect, but because he was trying. Not because their love was easy, but because it was real. Sometimes, she thought as they drove through the rainy London streets, that was enough. Sometimes trying was all anyone could do, and love was the only compass worth following. Even when the path ahead was dark and uncertain, they would find their way, together, or they would fall trying. But at least they would do it honestly, with eyes open and hearts finally, terrifyingly vulnerable to one another. The flat in Clerkenwell was exactly as Cassian had described it: small, functional, anonymous. A one-bedroom space with exposed brick walls and windows overlooking a quiet courtyard. Eleanor could immediately tell the difference between this place and his other properties. There was no ostentation here, no evidence of wealth displayed for its own sake, just a comfortable sofa, a well-used desk, shelves filled with books that had actually been read. This was where Cassian came to be himself, whoever that was beneath the armor of suits and corporate power. They spread the files across every available surface, creating a timeline of Victor D'Angelo's crimes and Marcus Thornton's complicity. The evidence was damning for both men, but as they worked through the night, Elena began to notice something strange. There were gaps in the documentation, missing pieces that should have been there. References to events without supporting details, mentions of transactions without corresponding financial records. "Someone's been through these files before us," she said, holding up a folder with visible signs of tampering. "Pages have been removed, carefully enough that you wouldn't notice unless you were looking for it." Cassian examined the folder, his expression darkening. "My father's lawyer. He had access to the safe after the funeral, was supposed to organize the estate documents. So I thought he was trustworthy, or Thornton got to him, paid him to remove anything too incriminating, anything that would directly tie Thornton to the worst crimes. Which means what we have might not be enough. Thornton's covered his tracks too well." Elena sat back, exhausted and frustrated. They had been working for 6 hours straight, fueled by coffee and determination, but the reality was becoming clear. Thornton had spent 20 years planning this revenge, and he had been thorough. The evidence against him was circumstantial at best, easily disputed by expensive lawyers. Meanwhile, Cassian had already gone public with his father's crimes and his own complicity, making himself vulnerable while Thornton remained protected. "There has to be something else," Elena said. "Something Thornton doesn't know about, something your father kept hidden even from his lawyer." "Like what?" "I don't know. A backup, insurance? Men like your father, they don't trust anyone. He must have had something to protect himself if Thornton ever tried to betray him." Cassian was quiet for a long moment, thinking. Then his eyes widened. "The house. There's another safe. In my mother's old room. My father had it installed after she was hospitalized, but I never knew the combination. I assumed it was empty, just another security measure he never bothered to remove. Could he have stored something there? Something even his lawyer wouldn't know about? It's possible. My mother's room was off limits after she left. My father kept it locked, never let anyone inside. I only went in there once after he died, and it was too painful. All her things exactly as she left them, like a shrine to his guilt. We need to check. It might be our only chance." They drove back to Belgravia as dawn broke over London, the city still quiet in that brief window between night and morning. The house seemed even more oppressive in the grey light, and Eleanor felt a chill as they climbed the stairs to the second floor. Cassian led her to a door at the end of the corridor, its surface dusty from disuse. Inside, the room was frozen in time, a four-poster bed with pristine white linens, a vanity covered in perfume bottles and jewelry, Photographs of a younger, happier version of Cassian's mother, before whatever Victor had done had broken her. The air smelled stale and sad, thick with abandonment and grief. The safe was hidden behind a full-length mirror. Cassian stared at the electronic keypad, clearly at a loss. I have no idea what the combination might be. My father never shared it. Try your mother's birthday. He did nothing. Their anniversary? Nothing. When was she hospitalized? Cassian entered the date and the safe clicked open. Inside were more files, these ones in pristine condition, clearly untouched since Victor had placed them there. But there was something else too. A leather journal, its pages yellowed with age, and a large envelope marked with a single word in Victor's harsh handwriting: insurance. Cassian pulled out the journal first, opening it carefully. His mother's handwriting filled the pages, neat and precise in the early entries, becoming increasingly erratic as the dates progressed. It was a diary, Elena realized, watching Cassian's face grow pale as he read. She knew, he whispered. She knew everything. The bribes, the threats, the illegal dealings. She kept records of it all, dates and details. She even knew about the shelter fire. Why didn't she say anything? Why didn't she go to the authorities? Because she was afraid. He threatened her, told her that if she ever spoke out, he would destroy everyone she loved. That she would lose me, lose her family, lose everything. Cassian's voice was shaking now. She tried to protect me by staying silent. And it drove her mad. The guilt, the knowledge, the burden of keeping his secrets. It broke her. Elena felt tears on her cheeks. Another woman destroyed by Victor D'Angelo. Another life ruined in the pursuit of profit and power. Cassian, I'm so sorry. She writes about meeting my father, about how charming he was in the beginning, how he promised her the world and delivered a prison, how by the time she realized what he really was, she was already trapped. He flipped through more pages, his hands trembling. And here, toward the end, she writes about wanting to die, about hoping he would kill her so it would all be over. She prayed for an accident, an illness, anything that would free her, but he didn't kill her. He just let her break, which was worse. She's been in that hospital for 15 years, Elena. 15 years of existing without living, conscious but not present. That's what loving my father cost her. That's the price of being connected to him. Elena took the journal gently from his hands before he could read more, before the words could do any more damage. You're not him. You need to remember that. You're not your father, and you won't destroy the people you love. How can you be sure? Because you're here. Because you're fighting to make things right. Because you would rather lose everything than become him. She kissed him then, needing to ground them both in the present, in the reality of their connection. He responded desperately, pulling her close. And for a moment they forgot about journals and safes and the weight of inherited sins. When they finally broke apart, Cassian picked up the envelope marked insurance. Inside were photographs, dozens of them, showing Victor D'Angelo with various people in compromising situations, business meetings that were clearly bribes being exchanged, construction sites where safety violations were obvious, and most damning of all, photographs of Marcus Thornton participating in it all. Planning sessions, money exchanges, even visiting the shelter site days before the fire. This is it, Elena breathed. This is proof of Thornton's direct involvement. Your father was protecting himself, making sure Thornton could never betray him without being destroyed too. Mutually assured destruction, the only kind of trust my father understood. There was also a letter, addressed to Cassian in his father's handwriting. Elena watched as he read it, seeing emotions flicker across his face. Anger, pain, something that might have been understanding. What does it say? She asked softly. That he's sorry. That he knows what he's done. Knows he's a monster but couldn't stop himself. That power became an addiction, and by the time he realized it, he had lost everything that mattered. His wife, his humanity, his soul. He says he hopes I'll be better than him, stronger than him, that I'll find a way to break the cycle. Cassian's voice broke. He says he loves me and he's sorry he never knew how to show it. Do you believe him? I don't know. Does it matter? He's dead, and his apology doesn't undo any of the harm he caused. Doesn't bring back your mother or heal mine. But maybe it means something that he knew, that he wasn't completely without conscience. It means he was human, terrible and cruel and destructive, but human. That's somehow worse, isn't it? If he had been a complete monster, it would be easier to hate him. They gathered everything, the journal, the photographs, the letter, and brought it all back to the Clerkenwell flat. With this new evidence, they finally had what they needed, not just to expose Thornton, but to tell the complete story. Victor D'Angelo's crimes, his victims, his accomplices, and the slow destruction of everyone connected to him. But before they went to the authorities, there was one more thing Elena needed to do. She had been thinking about it since finding her mother's photograph, since learning the truth about how Maria Marquez had died. She needed to visit the site where the shelter had stood, needed to say goodbye properly. Cassian drove her there that afternoon, parking across the street from the luxury apartment building that now occupied the space. Elena stood on the pavement, staring up at the gleaming glass and steel, trying to imagine what had been there before. A modest building full of desperate women trying to survive, trying to protect their children, trying to believe that tomorrow might be better than today. "She fought for me," Elena said. "My mother. She died fighting for a safe place for us to live. That means something. It means everything. I spent my whole life thinking she had abandoned me, that I wasn't worth keeping. And all along she loved me enough to die for me." Cassian's arm went around her waist, pulling her close. "She would be proud of you. Of the woman you've become, the strength you've shown. You're everything she fought for. I want to do something for her, something permanent. A memorial maybe, or a foundation in her name. Something that acknowledges she existed, that her life mattered. We'll do it together. A foundation supporting domestic violence victims, providing safe housing and legal aid. Everything she needed and never got. We'll call it the Maria Marquez Foundation, and we'll make sure her story is told." Elena turned in his arms, looking up at him. "You would do that? Put your mother's name alongside hers?" "My mother would want that. She would want her suffering to mean something, to help prevent others from experiencing the same fate. And your mother deserves to be remembered as a hero, not a footnote in my father's crimes." They stood there for a long time, two damaged people finding healing in shared purpose. The past couldn't be changed, but the future was still unwritten. And maybe, Elena thought, that was the point. You couldn't undo the harm that had been done, couldn't resurrect the dead or erase the scars, but you could choose to build something better on the ruins, could transform pain into purpose and grief into action. That evening, they met with Cassian's lawyers and laid out everything they had discovered. The lawyers were grave-faced and concerned, warning them that going public with this information would have serious consequences. Cassian could face legal action, might even be charged as an accessory despite his ignorance of many of his father's crimes. The company would likely collapse entirely, taking thousands of jobs with it. "But it's the right thing to do," Cassian said firmly. "I'm not protecting my father's legacy anymore, and I'm not letting Thornton get away with his crimes." "Mr. Thornton has already filed a lawsuit against you," one of the lawyers said. "He's claiming that you've defamed him, that your public statements about your father's business practices have damaged his reputation by association. He's seeking significant damages. Let him sue. We have evidence that proves his direct involvement. He won't want this to go to trial, not when it means exposing his own crimes. He might not have a choice. If you turn over this evidence to the authorities, they'll investigate everyone involved, including you. I understand. I'm prepared to face whatever consequences come." Elena watched him make this choice, saw the man he was becoming, not the ruthless businessman his father had been, not the guilty son trying to atone for inherited sins, but something new. Someone willing to sacrifice everything for truth and justice, even when it cost him personally. The lawyers drew up a strategy. They would approach the authorities first thing Monday morning, presenting all the evidence in a coordinated fashion. They would also contact several journalists, making sure the story was told properly, that Victor D'Angelo's victims were centered in the narrative rather than just being statistics. And they would prepare for the inevitable backlash, the legal battles, the public scrutiny. Elena spent that weekend at the Clerkenwell flat with Cassian, neither of them wanting to be alone. They talked for hours, sharing stories from their childhoods, dreams for the future, fears about what was coming. They made love with a desperate intensity, as if trying to memorize each other's bodies, to create memories strong enough to sustain them through whatever trials lay ahead. On Sunday evening, as they lay tangled together in Cassian's bed, Eleanor's phone rang. An unknown number, but she answered anyway. "Miss Marquez?" Marcus Thornton's voice was cold and controlled. "I understand you've been busy this week, breaking into safes, stealing documents, conspiring against me. It's not theft to take what already belongs to the victims. Clever, but ultimately futile. Those documents can't be authenticated, and any testimony from you or Cassian will be dismissed as the desperate attempts of guilty parties to deflect blame. I've already filed suit against him for defamation. By the time I'm done, he'll have nothing left. And you'll be collateral damage, just like your mother was. You're not going to win this, Thornton. We have proof of your involvement in every one of Victor's crimes. Photographs, financial records, testimony from his widow. When this goes public, you'll be the one facing criminal charges. Empty threats. You have nothing that can touch me. Don't we? Tell me, does the name Sarah Chen mean anything to you?" Silence on the other end. Then carefully, "Who?" "The forensic accountant Cassian hired to trace his father's financial dealings. She's very thorough, Thornton. She's found offshore accounts, shell companies, payments that trace directly back to you, including a rather large sum paid to you just 2 weeks before the shelter fire. Insurance money, she thinks, or payment for services rendered." More silence. Eleanor could almost hear Thornton recalculating, realizing that his careful plans had overlooked something crucial. "What do you want?" he asked finally. "The truth, all of it. Everything you know about the fire, about the shelter, about my mother. You testify against Victor D'Angelo's crimes, accept your own culpability, and maybe we don't push for the maximum charges against you. You're offering me a deal? I'm offering you a chance to do the right thing for once in your miserable life. Take it or leave it. And if I refuse, then we go to the authorities with everything we have, and you spend the rest of your life fighting legal battles you can't win. Your choice." Thornton was quiet for a long moment. "Then I want immunity, full immunity from prosecution in exchange for my testimony. That's not my call, but I'll make sure the prosecutors know you're willing to cooperate. I'll think about it. You have 24 hours. After that, we're going public with or without you." She hung up and turned to Cassian, who had been listening to the entire conversation. "Do you think he'll take it?" "I don't know. Men like Thornton don't like admitting defeat, but he's also a survivor. If he thinks cooperating gives him the best chance of avoiding prison, he'll do it. And if he doesn't, then we fight him, together, whatever comes." Monday morning arrived grey and wet, typical London weather that matched Elena's mood. She dressed carefully in her best outfit, which still looked shabby compared to the expensive suits Cassian wore with unconscious ease. But she held her head high as they walked into the offices of the Crown Prosecution Service, carrying boxes of evidence that would change both their lives forever. The meeting lasted 4 hours. Lawyers examined documents, asked pointed questions, made careful notes. Elena told her mother's story, fighting back tears as she described Maria Marquez's desperate attempts to protect the women in the shelter. Her refusal to be intimidated, her death in a fire that should never have happened. Cassian detailed his father's business practices, his own slow discovery of the extent of Victor's crimes, his decision to come forward despite the personal cost. By the end, the prosecutors were grim-faced but determined. "This is enough to open formal investigations into both Victor D'Angelo's estate and Marcus Thornton," the lead prosecutor said. "We'll need additional testimony, of course. Witness statements, forensic accounting, all of it properly documented for trial. But what you've given us today is a solid foundation. What happens now?" Eleanor asked. "We build the case, gather more evidence, and then we file charges. This will be high profile, Miss Marquez. Very public. Are you prepared for that?" "I am. My mother deserves to have her story told. All of Victor D'Angelo's victims do." They left the offices to find journalists already gathering, tipped off by sources Elena suspected were Cassian's lawyers. Questions were shouted, cameras flashed, and Cassian pulled Elena close as they pushed through to his car. The story would break tonight, would dominate the news cycle for weeks. There was no going back now. That afternoon, Marcus Thornton called. "I'll testify. Full cooperation in exchange for immunity. But I want it in writing, signed by the prosecutors before I say a word." "I'll pass that along," Elena said, feeling no triumph, only exhaustion. Justice was messy and complicated, and deals with devils never felt clean. But if Thornton's testimony helped secure convictions, helped ensure that Victor D'Angelo's crimes were fully exposed, then it was worth it. The following weeks were brutal. The media coverage was relentless, with every detail of Victor D'Angelo's criminal empire splashed across headlines. Cassian's face appeared on front pages, some portraying him as a hero for coming forward, others suggesting he had known all along and was only trying to save himself. Elena found herself hounded by journalists wanting to know about the orphan teacher, who had brought down a business empire, about her relationship with Cassian, about her mother's death. The school board finally accepted Cassian's offer to save St. Dominic's, but with conditions. He would have no direct involvement in school operations, and all funding would go through an independent trust. Eleanor was promoted to head of the classics department and given a pay rise that made her cry when she saw the number. Not because it was large by Cassian's standards, but because it meant security, stability, the ability to save for the first time in her life. D'Angelo Properties underwent massive restructuring. Cassian stepped down as CEO, installing a board of directors committed to ethical business practices. Half the company's assets were liquidated to fund restitution payments to Victor's victims or their families. The other half was reformed into a social enterprise focused on affordable housing and community development. It would never be as profitable as it had been under Victor, but it would be clean. Through it all, Elena and Cassian clung to each other. They had rough patches, moments when the stress threatened to tear them apart, times when Elena wondered if love was really enough to overcome such different backgrounds and such traumatic histories. But they kept choosing each other, kept fighting for their relationship, even when it would have been easier to walk away. 6 months after that first meeting with prosecutors, Eleanor received a package at school. Inside was a book, old and worn, with a Latin inscription on the cover, Carpe Diem, seize the day. And tucked inside the pages was a letter, written in faded ink on delicate paper. My dearest daughter, it began, and Elena felt her heart stop. She read it standing in her classroom, tears streaming down her face, as her mother's words reached across 26 years of silence. Maria Marquez had written this letter in the weeks before her death, entrusting it to a friend with instructions to give it to Eleanor when she was old enough to understand. The letter explained everything. How Maria had come to England fleeing an abusive relationship in Spain. How she had found refuge in the shelter. How she had fought to protect the other women there. How she had known the end was coming. Had sensed that Victor D'Angelo's patience was running out, but refused to give up. I fight not just for myself, she wrote, but for you, my beautiful girl. So you will grow up in a world where women like us matter, where men like D'Angelo cannot destroy us with impunity. I may not survive this battle, but if my death means you live in a better world, it will be enough. The letter ended with words that broke Elena's heart and healed it simultaneously. You were not abandoned, my love. You were protected. Everything I did for you. Be strong, be brave, be the woman I dreamed you would become, and know that I loved you more than life itself. Always. Mama. Elena sat down heavily, clutching the letter to her chest, sobbing so hard she could barely breathe. Her students found her like that when they arrived for class, and without a word they surrounded her, these tough kids from tough neighborhoods, offering silent comfort in the only way they knew how. By being present, by witnessing her pain, by letting her know she wasn't alone. That evening she showed the letter to Cassian. He read it carefully, tears in his own eyes, and pulled her into his arms. She would be so proud of you. I hope so. I've tried to be what she wanted, strong and brave and unwilling to accept injustice. You are all of that and more. Elena, you're the bravest person I've ever met. I don't feel brave. I feel scared most of the time. Scared of losing you, scared of not being enough, scared that all of this will fall apart. Then we'll be scared together. But Elena, I'm not going anywhere. I love you. I want to spend the rest of my life with you if you'll have me. She pulled back to look at him. Is that a proposal? Not yet. But it will be. When the legal battles are over, when things have settled, when I can offer you a future that isn't drowning in scandal and courtrooms. I want to do it properly. I want to deserve you. You already do. Cassian, you've changed everything. My life, my understanding of what's possible, my belief in second chances. You've given me back my mother's story. helped me understand that I wasn't abandoned but loved. How could I not want forever with you? They kissed, and it felt like coming home, like finding the place they were always meant to be. Not in expensive houses or prestigious schools, but in each other's arms, in the space between two broken people who had somehow made each other whole. The trial, when it finally came, was everything the prosecutors had promised. High-profile, brutal, exhausting. Marcus Thornton testified against Victor D'Angelo's estate, detailing decades of criminal activity. Eleanor took the stand and told her mother's story, her voice never wavering, even as she faced aggressive cross-examination from defense lawyers trying to discredit her. Cassian testified about his father's crimes and his own journey from ignorance to understanding to action. In the end, Victor D'Angelo's estate was found liable for wrongful death, fraud, racketeering, and a host of other charges. Massive fines were levied, compensation awarded to victims or their families. Marcus Thornton received his immunity, but was destroyed in the court of public opinion, his name forever associated with corruption and greed. And Elena received something she had never expected. Formal acknowledgement from the court that her mother, Maria Marquez, had been a victim of corporate violence, that her death had not been an accident, but the result of criminal negligence at best, conspiracy to murder at worst. It didn't bring her mother back, but it meant something. It meant Maria Marquez's story was now part of the official record, that she would be remembered not as a statistic, but as a woman who had fought for justice and paid the ultimate price. 1 year after that first charity gala, Cassian took Elena back to Oxfordshire. The cottage had been transformed since their disastrous first visit. It was warmer now, more personal, filled with books and photographs and evidence of lives actually being lived. They had been spending weekends there, escaping London's intensity, building something new in a place that had once represented their destruction. He proposed in the garden, on a spring evening when the roses were in bloom and the light was golden, and everything felt possible. He didn't have a ring, just a promise, that he would spend the rest of his life trying to be worthy of her, that he would choose truth over comfort, justice over convenience, love over fear, that they would build something good together on the ruins of their father's sins. Elena said yes without hesitation, because she had learned that love wasn't about being perfect or having all the answers. It was about choosing each other, again and again, through scandal and heartbreak and impossible odds. It was about believing that broken people could heal together, that redemption was possible, that the past didn't have to determine the future. They married quietly 3 months later, in a small ceremony at St. Dominic's, surrounded by Elena's students and the few friends they had who had stood by them through the worst of the scandal. Elena wore a simple white dress and carried wildflowers. Cassian wore a suit that had belonged to his grandfather, one of the few pieces of family history not tainted by his father's crimes. They exchanged vows they had written themselves, promising to build a life based on honesty, equality, and unwavering commitment to justice. The reception was held in the school gymnasium, with donated food and makeshift decorations, and it was the happiest day of Elena's life, not because it was elegant or expensive, but because it was real, because everyone there had chosen to stand with them, to celebrate love that had survived impossible odds, to believe in second chances and hard-won redemptions. As they danced their first dance to music playing from someone's phone, Elena looked up at her husband and felt overwhelmed by gratitude. For this man who had chosen to be better than his legacy, for the students who had shown her that family was built, not born, for the memory of a mother she had never known, but who had loved her enough to die fighting, for the hard-won knowledge that justice, though slow and imperfect, was still worth pursuing, for the understanding that love, real love, wasn't about finding someone perfect, but about choosing someone imperfect and building something beautiful together. "What are you thinking?" Cassian asked, his arms around her waist, his eyes full of love and wonder. "That we made it. Through everything, all the pain and scandal and impossible obstacles, we made it. We did. Though there were moments I didn't think we would. Me too. But we kept choosing each other. That made all the difference. It did. It does. It will." He kissed her softly. "I love you, Elena D'Angelo. I love you too. And I'm keeping Marquez, by the way. Helena Marquez D'Angelo. Both names, both histories, both futures. Perfect. Absolutely perfect." They continued dancing as the evening light faded and stars appeared overhead. Outside, London carried on in its usual chaos. But here, in this small gymnasium with its peeling paint and scuffed floors, two people who had every reason to break had instead chosen to heal. Had transformed pain into purpose, grief into action, inherited sins into conscious goodness. Their story wasn't a fairy tale. There was no magical solution, no easy redemption. But it was real and hard-won and completely theirs. And sometimes, Elena thought as she rested her head against Cassian's chest and felt his heartbeat steady and strong, that was better than any fairy tale could ever be. Because fairy tales don't teach you how to survive darkness. They don't show you how to build light from shadow, how to transform suffering into strength, how to love someone despite knowing all their flaws and fears. Real life, messy and complicated and often painful, teaches you that. And the love that survives real life, that grows stronger through trials and trauma, that chooses to flourish despite every reason to wither, that love is worth more than any fantasy. Elena Marquez D'Angelo had learned that lesson the hard way. But standing here in her husband's arms, surrounded by people who had become her chosen family, she wouldn't change a single moment of the journey that had brought her here. Because every painful step had been necessary, every heartbreak had taught her something vital. Every obstacle had made her stronger. And in the end, she had found exactly what her mother had wanted for her. A life lived bravely and honestly. A love built on truth and equality. A future where the sins of the past no longer dictated the choices of the present. A world, however small, where justice mattered and women like Maria Marquez were remembered as heroes rather than footnotes. It was enough. More than enough. It was everything.